just before coffee, so I'll try and keep this interesting and keep you awake as I go through this topic. My name's Mariam. I work as a head of QA in a small fintech firm called Kaplan Systems. And today I want to talk to you about release management. Has anyone heard this song? I used to be in a team a while ago, and whenever we had to deploy a product to production, the tech leads would actually, and I kid you not, they would just start singing the song. So when I thought about talking about this case study, I couldn't think of a more fitting title for the conversation. So a couple of years ago, I was part of a project where we had everything which you would say are things you should not have in a product or some software that you're trying to deliver, and everything was going wrong. So this product was the biggest product for the company in about 10 years. It was going to impact all the customers in the UK. And the company decided that we're going to set up a brand new office in London. So there were new engineering teams brought on board, there were new designers and new DevOps, tech ops teams, there was new leadership in the London office as well. And also this team was asked to work with another team in the north of England, people who'd been in the company for quite a while. So that was one changing aspect. The second changing aspect was it was decided that we're going to use React for creating this product. Because it was a new technology, they wanted to make sure that they were using cutting edge technology, wanted to make the place interesting for people to join and so on. And also someone somewhere decided that we're going to use AWS. We hadn't used any cloud deployment for any of the products. This was going to be $1 million project, not a project, sorry, the revenue of the project was, the impact, sorry, to the customers was a few million pounds. And basically, if something went wrong, they would lose everything in the UK. Oh, and there was a hard deadline. The project had 18 months. The hard deadline was there because the people were asked, we were using a third-party client, and they were told that we're going to actually switch off your services on a date. And of course, when the deadlines are decided, none of the engineering teams were contacted, none of the engineering teams were involved. So that's what was happening. This is how the entire engineering team was feeling, that you're asking us to use a new technology, you're asking us to use a new infrastructure, you're asking new people to work together, and then you're expecting that nothing will go wrong or things will be on time. What were the challenges? With the new people coming in, they obviously brought a new mindset of engineering disciplines and techniques, which they wanted the whole group to adopt. Just to give you an idea of scale, it was about 20, 25 agile teams. Each team had about 7 engineers, a couple of testers, there were tech leads, then there were directors, there were senior directors, and so on and so forth. So about 150 people just in engineering that were involved. Each of the teams were developing multiple components. Some were creating multiple parts of the APIs. Some were creating the website, various forms, and so on. And outside of those, the company already had service transition teams, which were working with existing products. They also had incident management teams, which were all used to specific processes in place because the company had been using them for 20 plus years. Of course, we were 8 months in. There were some POCs that were done by that time, which looked like they were working, but nothing was getting delivered. We were 8 months in, and I think I joined the project when I was about 10 months away from that deadline. I actually had to go in and help revise things like the test pyramid because there were tests which were being written, but it wasn't clear what level of testing was being done at which level, how were the teams doing sign-off, how were they deploying, everybody, it was pretty much like a zoo, quite chaotic. So we were at that point, the exec teams obviously started getting twitchy. They said, this isn't working, how are we going to make sure it's fixed? And we are actually going to step in and ask you to take accountability. So what happened, and I'm sure somebody will roll your eyes at this, a 50 people stand-up was arranged for every single day. Every day at 4:30 p.m., all the exec team, senior directors, the tech leads were asked to do a stand-up. And if anyone's seen the show called Whose Line Is It Anyway, it was literally like the hoedown every single day. We went in and we're like, God, I've been asked to report on my milestones, why can't they just trust me? It's very important to understand that our exec teams lose trust in us when they don't see anything delivered. And I feel that for them to ask us to come to this stand-up and arrange it was fair. If I was in their position, I would like to actually go in and start doing some micromanagement to see where we are and what are the delays for this project. At that time, it was very clear that nobody was actually trying to bring the whole system together. Each team would sign off their individual components, their APIs, they would deploy. They would actually do demos of their local machines. That's a separate problem that we can talk about. They would sign off and they're like, yeah, it looks fine. The POs would be really happy. And that's where it would end. Nobody was using the entire system. We had testers, we had really good testers, but the time pressure was not allowing the people to actually sign off properly. So in that stand-up, a lot of people said we need someone to do release management. I think we need to write out a job description and let's see who we can find. And at that point, I went, I'll do it. Something I want to tell you about myself. So I've been in the testing industry throughout my career, 10 plus years now. And I've come to a point, I used to write code first for testing and then I went into test leadership. And when this situation came up, I actually volunteered because I feel thinking about the entire product is not only my responsibility, I need to find a way to help my entire team to think about the entire product. Quality assurance activities are not just about testing. A lot of people actually just stick to software testing or writing automated tests, but they forget about how can we introduce quality into our entire processes. And that's when that's why release management was something which really was interesting to me. So what was my plan? I basically wanted everybody to think about the whole system. Anybody should be able to use the system and find it working. I wanted the teams to come out of their silos and actually think about how their specific API call is being integrated into which form and how is it being used. And someone else had to do the dirty job as well. This was 150 people who probably didn't like me, or people who were thinking, oh, I was going to apply for that role. And I just volunteered. I feel I was successful in getting this role because I had the backing of my leaders and I had the trust from them that I would be able to make this change. Something which I think really helped me step into release management and as well as software testing was also because I myself was a customer of this product. That's why I joined the company. I was using this product and I hated the UI. And I actually asked them in the interview, when are you going to fix this? And little did I know that I would be a part of this project soon after. I feel as people who work in the world of quality assurance, it's really important to think about the products as a whole. If we ourselves are the customer, we would always think about the value we are delivering to our customers as well. You would try and think about all the use cases. And I kid you not, when this was deployed to production, the first bug was actually found on my account because I had some international transactions and nobody else did because we were only testing on GBP transactions and so on. So this whole situation meant that there was going to be a change for the people who were going to be working in this project. The teams, the engineers, all were very smart, but they didn't know how to work together. And the idea was to help them work together. So my plan was that I'm going to come with a process of how we're going to release as a team and go from there. This is something I came up I came across recently, actually, I wish I did at the time, about how do you help teams to form a habit. Well, generally, I would say. The first step is reminder. When you want to try and make a change, when you want to implement something new, something which will be of use, you need to start reminding people about the process. Imagine a child that you're trying to teach ABC to. You keep repeating ABC, ABC, ABC. That's the reminder, constant reminder until it grows on them. Then the second step is routine. You want to make it normal for them. I always say that testing, quality assurance, thinking about quality should become second nature to teams. And how can we make it second nature to them? I think the way the industry is headed towards, we're looking at teams which will have engineers, not testers and developers. We will have engineers with different skill sets, and that's how it will go. So we want to try and make people used to adopting these processes. And the third one is reward. Reward is really important when you're trying to form a new habit. When you start going to the gym, for example, first few weeks, first few days are really hard because you're not seeing any results. But then when you eventually see results, or you feel better, you feel mentally enthused, that's when you think, I'm not going to stop this habit. I'm going to continue doing this. In the case of this project, the reminder was going to be, put a process in place, start reminding everybody, start sounding like a broken record. The second thing was, get everybody used to that process. Encourage them to adopt it rather than enforce them to adopt it. And the third thing was, the reward was, you deployed your component, there were no bugs. So your deployments were quite seamless. That's quite good. So what happened next? The text is blurred for reasons. I came up with this process, this weird flowcharty thing. So you have to remember, this place had a service transition team which was deploying products quite frequently, and they were quite used to a process. We weren't going to change that process for service transition teams because there was a lot of compliance that they had to adhere to. So how do we make sure that these engineers who want to go trailblazing when it comes to deploying the product are actually adhering to those things? So what I did was, I came up with this process. I sat down and actually said, right, the first step of the process is going to be, you have to specify some inputs. What is it that you as a team want to deploy? What is the product? What's the API change? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the tests that you're running? You have to provide these inputs. And once those inputs were signed off by the release manager, then they were asked to check the state of the current environment. The state of the current environment was going to be done by a system health check. You can have a simple endpoint that you ping over Jenkins, and if it comes back with a health check okay, which means it's gone through all the API calls or the smoke tests, then the system's good to go. They would deploy the product, their component, and once that's done, they would run their health checks as well, which would involve running lots of tests, whichever the team wants to come up with. After running their tests, the next step would be that we run tests on the entire system. So imagine, let's just take the example of Amazon. If your team is working on the search field, for example, if you've made an API change and you're deploying it, the first set of tests would be for that search field, which you would do at a component level. And once those pass, you want to make sure that the search field integrates with, say, the home page or the orders page and so on, all the integration points. The whole idea was that people needed to start thinking about integration, and that's what this process helped us with. If something failed, I asked the teams to actually go back and look at what they need to do to roll back their changes. This was going to be their responsibility as a team because they were going to hold up the rest of the teams. How did I manage this? So I did this in a very basic level. Created a simple release management board in Jira, where each team that wanted to deploy a component, they would raise a ticket, they would add the name of their component, they would add the version numbers, and add all the inputs in there. I would review it. Once I was signing that off, they would then go, okay, where it's the state of the system and follow the whole flowcharting process and so on. The last thing that each team had to do was also create release notes. There were no release notes, so we never knew what version of which component was deployed at a time for the product. Where does testing come into this? So all the teams were writing automated tests, but nobody was thinking about the system. We needed one integration test to tell us that the whole system's working as a whole. I actually pulled one of my STETs aside and I said to him, can you just write one system test with checks that a user can log in? So every time there was a deployment, just write one test. You don't have to create a complicated framework. You don't have to create complicated test data. Just start with one test, which we will run after every single deployment. So each time a component was deployed and the Jenkins build would pass, we would have a command pointing to another Jenkins build which had those system tests running. And once those were passed, the other teams would continue. So how did this work overall? So imagine the whole Jira board. There are quite a few tickets for teams that are wanting to deploy the components. They would get approval and I would just inform the teams that you're ready to go now and we have to. What I also did was there was a Slack channel which I created which had integration with all the Jenkins jobs, so you can actually see the commands. You could actually see what tickets were raised when, because otherwise I would be going mad trying to go through 2 locations trying to find out who's deploying when. But there was still a problem. Nobody likes change. And when you do introduce change, everybody has an opinion about it. Everybody wants to say, yeah, that's fine, but. And all I had to do was say to them, just stop. This is something I learned from my mentor, Dan North, for those who know him. He talks about the value of flow. And he says that in order to improve how the flow of your processes are, you need to first visualize what you're changing. So the visualization point was that I was asking all the teams to follow this deployment process and not changing it to start with. It also is in tune with the whole routine and reminder methodology that we spoke about earlier. Once they got used to it, it was more of a stabilizing phase. Everybody started understanding, okay, this is how the product is integrating with all the components. And that's when we said, okay, now it's time to improve it. How are we going to improve it? What we did was we had a whole architecture diagram of all the 20+ components that were being delivered. And then what we said was that, let's say, we wanted to see which components had the least number of integration points, which meant that there was a low failure rate. If they had high failure, then the impact would be low on the rest of the components. So we went bottom up. So if there were components which were at the bottom of the whole architecture stack, which needed to be deployed, we said, right, if those do not work, the topmost won't matter anyway. So we prioritized deploying multiple components in parallel at the same time. So what was the result? The benefit was that we did deliver the product on time. When we went live, we actually had, I think, 2 P1 issues in production in a quarter, which was great. We were actually running system tests as well, smoke tests as well on test users in production. I think there's a whole other topic about testing in production, which is quite an interesting shift in the industry. There was going to be no change for the service transition teams. For them, the process would remain the same. More so, the teams were actually getting used to fill their clunky forms and all these systems, unfortunately, which none of us like to use. The value of this was going to be that the transition to all of our customers is going to be seamless. There was a lot of, all the people in the company actually used that product in the end, and they actually saw that when the deployment happened, oh, I can't log in, right, we need to fix it right now, we can't do this, and so on. And everybody started thinking about quality. Everybody started thinking about, oh, okay, we're delivering this specific feature, what's the whole integration test related to it that we need to put in place? Another thing we also did was that we had, as you would have a dev, test, pre-prod, production environments. What we did was we were starting to use pre-prod as production internally. you want to move the whole idea of quality left. You want to start using pre-production as, okay, there's a bug, everybody stop, who is on the call, that person comes in, that person looks at the logs in AWS and goes on. In the end, I want to say that when we, as engineers, we just design to come up with something complex. We always create complex frameworks. There's a thing called complexity bias for a reason, because we're just wired to create things which make us look smart, maybe. But what's important is that when you're trying to do process improvements, especially with regards to quality, you need to make it simple. When it's simple, it's really simple for people to understand. And when it's simple to understand, the adoption is easy. And when the adoption is easy, everybody goes on the journey with you. Thank you. Any questions? Brilliant. Time for coffee. Thank you, everybody.